They thought my family emergency was a golden opportunity. They had no idea a $50 million chemical time bomb was about to detonate on their balance sheet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a chair. I just walked out of that glass-walled office, took a deep breath of the polluted New York air, and started calculating the precise market value of their betrayal. My name is Aviana Craig, and this is the story of how a 2-week leave of absence to care for my dying mother became the most expensive lesson in intellectual property the fragrance industry had ever seen. For 5 years, I was the ghost in the machine at the House of Oralaya. Not a perfumer, but the perfumer. The nose. The one they kept hidden away in a bespoke laboratory that smelled of Madagascan vanilla, 100-petaled roses, and the faint, ozonic scent of pure creativity. The air in my lab wasn't just air, it was a carefully curated library of memories and possibilities. I was the artist behind Elysian Bloom, the fragrance that single-handedly pulled the legacy brand back from the brink of bankruptcy. Before me, House of Oralaya was a relic, a dusty bottle on your grandmother's vanity. After Elysian Bloom, it was a phenomenon. It wasn't just a perfume, it was an identity, a secret whispered on the skin of millions. I built it from the ground up, sourcing rare, ethically harvested ingredients from the most remote corners of the globe. I spent months convincing a family in Grass to part with a small portion of their jasmine harvest, a bloom so potent it only revealed its true heart at midnight. I worked with biochemists to stabilize the fleeting scent of a specific Amazonian orchid that only bloomed for 6 hours a year. This wasn't a job, it was my life's work, my soul distilled into a bottle. The old CEO, Julian Davenport II, understood that. He gave me complete creative freedom and a budget that made other perfumers weep with envy. He knew that true luxury couldn't be rushed or faked. It was alchemy, not accounting. Then he retired, and his son, Julian Davenport III, took over. Julian III was everything his father wasn't. He had an MBA from Wharton, a haircut that cost more than my first car, and eyes that saw the world not as a canvas of possibilities, but as a spreadsheet of profit and loss. He walked through my lab once, his expensive leather shoes clicking on the polished concrete floor, and his only comment was, "Is there a way to get this same smell for 10% of the cost?" He brought with him Isabella Rossi, a director of product with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper ambition. She saw Elysian Bloom not as a work of art, but as a cash cow to be milked for every last drop, even if it meant starving the animal to death. Their new vision for the company was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. They called it democratizing luxury. I called it what it was, making things cheap. Their first official directive landed in my inbox like a declaration of war. They wanted to reformulate Elysian Bloom for mass market distribution. "We need to simplify the formula," Isabella said during a conference call, her voice dripping with false empathy. "Replace some of the more exotic botanicals with high-quality synthetic equivalents. It will be undetectable to the average consumer." I almost laughed. The average consumer wasn't my audience. My audience was the person who understood that the difference between a real rose and a chemical approximation was the difference between falling in love and reading about it in a book. "That's not possible," I said, keeping my voice level. "The soul of the fragrance lies in the complexity of those natural ingredients. The way they interact with each other, the way they evolve on the skin, you can't replicate that with synthetics. You'll kill it." Julian cut in, his tone condescendingly patient. "Aviana, we appreciate your passion. We really do, but the market is changing. We need volume, we need scalability. Your current production method is a bottleneck. We need you to be a team player." A team player, the corporate euphemism for do what you're told. I spent the next 2 weeks fighting them, presenting data, showing them the chemical analyses, pleading with them not to destroy the very thing that made them successful. They listened with polite smiles, their decisions already made. Then, the universe threw a grenade into my life. My mother, my fierce, wonderful mother who had raised me on her own, was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her weeks, maybe a month. My world collapsed. There was no choice to be made. I immediately filed for a 2-week leave of absence under the Family and Medical Leave Act. It was my legal right. I sent a formal email to Julian and Isabella, explaining the situation with as much professional detachment as I could muster. The night before I left, I did something I'd never done before. I locked away my true formula books, the leather-bound journals filled with my handwritten notes, my triumphs, my failures, my soul. They contained every iteration of Elysian bloom, every secret. In their place, I left a single, simplified formula on my workbench. It was a pale imitation, a version I had created to show them how much would be lost. It was technically a perfume, but it was a perfume without a soul. A pretty corpse. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that my absence, combined with their inevitable failure to replicate the magic, would finally make them understand my value. I believed that when I returned, they would be desperate to have me back, ready to listen. I was so naive. Those 2 weeks were a blur of hospitals, hand-holding, and whispered goodbyes. I watched the strongest woman I knew fade away, and a piece of my own heart went with her. I returned to work the Monday after her funeral, a ghost walking through a world that had lost its color. The office felt different, colder. People avoided my eyes. Isabella, who usually couldn't wait to corner me with a new idea, was suddenly nowhere to be found. The knot in my stomach tightened with every step I took toward my lab. The lab door, which was usually secured by a biometric lock only I could open, was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was wrong. It smelled cheap, like a knockoff. On my workbench, next to the decoy formula I'd left, were dozens of trial vials. They had been trying to replicate my work, and they had been failing. Before I could even process the violation, my phone buzzed. A calendar invite from Julian's assistant. Urgent meeting. The subject line was blank. I walked to his corner office, the one with glass walls so everyone could witness the power plays within. Julian and Isabella were sitting there, looking like two cats who had just cornered a canary. "Aviana, thank you for coming in," Julian began, not even bothering to offer condolences. "Please sit." I remained standing. "As you know," he continued, shuffling papers he clearly hadn't read, "we're moving in a new strategic direction, one that requires agility and a commitment to efficiency." He exchanged a look with Isabella. "Frankly, your resistance to the new formulation process and your unexpected absence during a critical development phase have shown us that we are no longer aligned." I stared at him, the words not quite making sense. My unexpected absence? I was with my mother, Julian. She passed away. A flicker of something, maybe annoyance at the inconvenience of human grief, crossed his face before he smoothed it over. "Yes, well, the business doesn't stop. While you were gone, Isabella and her team managed to successfully optimize the formula. They've created a version that is 99% identical to the original, but at a fraction of the cost. It's a huge win for us." Isabella gave a small, triumphant smile. "We just needed a fresh perspective," she said. "Sometimes the original creator can be too close to the project to see the opportunities for improvement." It was a lie, a bald-faced, outrageous lie. The chemical stench in my lab was proof of that, but it didn't matter. This was a pre-scripted execution. "Therefore," Julian said, getting to the point, "we've decided to eliminate your position. It's a redundancy now. Your services are no longer required, effective immediately." The words hung in the air, sharp and cold. 5 years of my life, the soul I had poured into this company, erased, replaced by a cheap copy and a lie. Security was already walking toward the office. They were going to escort me out like a criminal. I didn't plead. I didn't cry. I simply looked at Julian, then at Isabella, and I let a small, genuine smile touch my lips. "I see," I said softly. "Thank you for clarifying the situation." They looked confused. They had expected tears, anger, a scene. They didn't get one. As the security guard led me to my lab to collect my personal belongings, which amounted to a single framed photo of my mom, I saw the truth. They thought they had cut out the artist. They had no idea they had just armed her. They saw a grieving, unemployed perfumer. They didn't see the intricate web of chemical secrets I had woven, the legal tripwires I had inadvertently set, or the ticking time bomb they had just activated. The moment the glass doors of the Aurelia building closed behind me, I didn't go home. I walked 10 blocks downtown to a steel and glass tower and took the elevator to the 45th floor. The plaque on the door read Thorne and Associates, Intellectual Property and Trade Secret Law. I walked in and told the receptionist, "I'm here to see Marcus Thorne. Tell him Aviana Craig is calling in her one big favor." Marcus and I went way back. We'd been lab partners in organic chemistry at Columbia, bonding over late-night study sessions and a mutual hatred for our professor. While I had fallen in love with the art of molecules, he had fallen in love with the law that protected them. He was sharp, relentless, and the most loyal person I knew. He strode out of his office, a grin on his face that faded the moment he saw mine. "Avi," he said, his voice low, "what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said, following him into his office, which overlooked the entire city. I've seen the future of the House of Orlaia, and it's about to get very, very expensive for them." An hour later, after I had laid out the entire story, Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. It was the smile of a lawyer who had just been handed a royal flush. "They fired you," he said, shaking his head in disbelief, "for taking FMLA leave, and then they claimed they replicated your formula." "That's their story," I confirmed, "but here's where it gets interesting." I opened my briefcase and pulled out my secret, not the formula books, those were for later. I pulled out a binder filled with my personal research logs, dated and notarized from years before I even started at Orlaia. Elysian Bloom is more than just a list of ingredients, Marcus. Its unique signature, its impossible to replicate depth and staying power, comes from one thing. I flipped to a page filled with complex molecular diagrams. I call it Orlux. It's a proprietary, genetically modified yeast molecule. I designed it in my own time, in my own lab, long before Orlaia. It acts as a fixative, but it also interacts with the other botanicals, amplifying certain notes and creating new ones that don't exist in nature. It's the secret sauce. They have been using it for 5 years, and they have no idea what it really is. They think it's just some minor additive I order from a specialty supplier. Marcus's eyes lit up. "So they're using your patented, pre-existing intellectual property without a licensing agreement. Oh, this is good, Avi. This is very, very good. This alone is worth millions in damages." "It gets better," I said, leaning forward. I felt a cold calm settle over me, the grief momentarily pushed aside by the pure, clean energy of purpose. Orlux is a brilliant molecule, but it's also incredibly unstable. It requires a specific catalyst to keep it from breaking down, a completely organic, custom-blended stabilizer. The formula for that stabilizer exists in only one place. I tapped my temple. Right here. And in my locked notebooks at home. Marcus stared at me, the pieces clicking into place. "What happens to the perfume without the stabilizer?" "For the first 2, maybe 3 weeks, nothing," I said. "It will smell fine. A little flat, maybe, but passable. But after that, the Orlux molecule begins to decay. It undergoes a process called racemic decomposition. The beautiful, complex scent profile essentially curdles on a molecular level. It will start to smell sour. Then it will develop a faint but unmistakable odor of, well, rotten eggs." Marcus let out a low whistle. "And," I added, delivering the final blow, "one of the byproducts of the decomposition is a mild skin irritant. It won't cause any real harm, but it will certainly cause a lot of itchy, angry customers." He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. "So let me get this straight. The House of Orlaia has just fired the only person who knows the secret to their billion-dollar fragrance. They are about to mass-produce and ship millions of units of a product that is, for all intents and purposes, a ticking time bomb. A bomb that will not only smell disgusting, but will also give their customers a rash. And they have done all of this while illegally using your intellectual property." "That about sums it up," I said. He turned back to me and the smile was gone, replaced by a look of absolute focus. "This isn't just a lawsuit, Avi. This is a checkmate. We're not just going to get you what you're owed. We're going to give them an education. What do you want?" I thought about Julian's smug face, Isabella's triumphant smirk, the casual cruelty of firing a woman the week after her mother died. I thought about the art they were trying to destroy, the soul they were trying to commodify. "I want them to pay," I said, my voice quiet but hard as steel. "Not just for what they took from me. I want them to pay market rate for every single drop of my soul they ever sold." The first few weeks after my termination were a strange, hollow echo. The world was moving on, but I was caught in the amber of my grief. I organized my mother's affairs, sorted through a lifetime of photographs, and cried until I was dehydrated. But underneath the sorrow, a different kind of chemistry was at work. My pain was becoming a catalyst. My anger was crystallizing into a diamond-hard resolve. I didn't watch the news. I didn't check my old work emails. I gave the House of Orlaia the one thing they couldn't stand: silence. I knew their arrogance was their most volatile compound, and I was giving it all the room it needed to combust. Marcus handled everything. He filed the initial paperwork for my wrongful termination claim, a small, preliminary shot across the bow. It was mostly a formality, designed to document their illegal firing based on my FMLA leave. The real weapon, the Orlux patent infringement and trade secret theft, we kept hidden. Timing, as in perfumery, is everything. You have to let the top notes burn off before the heart can be revealed. While I mourned, Marcus built our case. He had my notebooks analyzed and the pages carbon dated by a forensic lab to prove they predated my employment. He gathered affidavits from the specialty suppliers I had used for my personal projects, confirming my independent work. He constructed a legal fortress, brick by meticulous brick, while we waited for the enemy to walk right into our trap. It didn't take long. 3 weeks after I was fired, the House of Oralaya launched a massive marketing campaign. My face wasn't in it, of course. Instead, it was Isabella Rossi, presented as the new visionary force behind the brand. The campaign was called Elysian Bloom Reimagined. They had the audacity to claim they had improved it, made it brighter and more modern. Julian gave an interview to a major business journal, talking about disrupting the legacy fragrance space and making luxury accessible to all. He called the new version a triumph of modern science over outdated, inefficient methods. He was practically taking a victory lap on my mother's grave. I watched the interview from my sofa, my mother's cat purring on my lap, and I felt nothing but a cold, clean pity. He had no idea what was coming. The product hit the shelves in a wave of glossy packaging and celebrity endorsements, and for about a week, it seemed like they might get away with it. The initial sales were strong, driven by the hype. But then, the first whispers began. They started in the places that mattered: the online forums for fragrance aficionados, the comment sections of influential perfume bloggers, the subreddits where the true noses gathered. These were my people, and they were not fooled. "Just bought the new Elysian Bloom," one post read. "Something is off. It has the basic shape of the original, but it's like a watercolor copy of an oil painting. All the depth is gone." Another wrote, "It's so thin. The opening is a screechy chemical floral, and the dry down disappears in an hour. The old formula would linger on my coat for days. This is a ghost." Then came the hashtag. It started with a single, influential blogger in Paris. After her scathing review of the hollowed-out imposter, she ended her post with a simple, devastating tag, "Not my Elysian Bloom." Within 48 hours, it was trending. It was a digital uprising of the senses. People posted pictures of their old, cherished bottles next to the new, cheapened ones. They shared stories of what the original fragrance meant to them: first dates, weddings, moments of quiet confidence. They weren't just customers, they were a community. And Julian and Isabella had just told them their taste was irrelevant. I watched the fire spread from my laptop, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. Marcus and I had a standing call every evening. "The reputational damage is already catastrophic," he told me, barely containing his excitement. "They're in full damage control mode. Their PR team is working overtime, releasing statements about subtle variations in natural ingredients. They're trying to gaslight their own customer base." "It won't work," I said. "They've underestimated their audience. Now we wait for Phase 2. Phase 2 arrived exactly on schedule at the beginning of the 4th week. The racemic decomposition was now well underway in hundreds of thousands of bottles sitting in warm warehouses and under bright department store lights. The complaints shifted from nuanced critiques of scent profiles to something far more visceral. "Help!" a frantic post on the company's Facebook page read. "I bought a new bottle of Elysian Bloom 2 weeks ago, and it started to smell like rotten eggs. I thought I was going crazy, but my husband smells it too. What is going on?" The trickle became a flood. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, it was a tidal wave of disgust. People uploaded videos of themselves opening their new bottles and recoiling in horror. The smell was so distinct, so offensive, that it became a morbidly viral challenge. Then came the reports of skin irritation. "Is anyone else getting a rash from the new Elysian Bloom?" a Reddit thread asked. Hundreds of replies poured in. "Yes, little red bumps on my neck and wrists." I thought it was my detergent, but this makes so much sense. My skin feels so itchy after I use it. The mainstream media, which had initially covered the reimagined launch with fluffy lifestyle pieces, now smelled blood in the water. Oralaya's Bloom wilts. Customers report foul odors and rashes in best-selling perfume. The sweet smell of failure. How House of Oralaya alienated its loyal fans. From luxury to lawsuit, perfume giant faces growing crisis. The company's stock price, which had enjoyed a small bump after the initial launch, began to plummet. It dropped 5% in one day. Then 10, then 20. Retail giants started pulling the product from their shelves. The huge win Julian had boasted about had become the single greatest disaster in the company's 100-year history. They issued a press release, blaming a contaminated batch from a third-party supplier and announcing a voluntary product recall. It was a weak, pathetic attempt to shift the blame. They were recalling every single bottle of the new formula, a logistical and financial nightmare that would cost them tens of millions of dollars. That was the moment Marcus had been waiting for. With the House of Orlaia at its absolute nadir, publicly humiliated, financially hemorrhaging, and completely terrified, he made his move. He didn't file a lawsuit. That would be too slow. He sent a single, devastating letter via courier to the office of Patricia Winters, the general counsel of Orlaia's parent company. The letter was a masterpiece of legal warfare. It laid out, in excruciating detail, their illegal termination of my employment. It then pivoted to the real issue, the unauthorized and unlicensed use of my patented intellectual property, the Orlux molecule. It included the patent number, the notarized research logs, and a preliminary estimate of damages for past usage that ran into the tens of millions. And then, the final, elegant stab wound. It detailed the chemical nature of the Orlux molecule, its inherent instability, and its predictable decomposition in the absence of my proprietary stabilizer. The letter didn't accuse them of creating a faulty product. It proved with scientific certainty that their theft of my intellectual property was the direct and unavoidable cause of their current, catastrophic crisis. It proved that they hadn't just stolen my formula, they had stolen a formula they were chemically incapable of understanding or controlling. It checkmated them not just legally, but scientifically. The letter concluded with a simple, non-negotiable demand, a meeting within 72 hours to discuss a settlement. It stated that if they failed to respond, we would not only file a lawsuit for a sum exceeding $50 million, but we would also file for a legal injunction. An injunction that would prevent them from using the name, Elysian Bloom, or any of its derivatives, effectively killing their flagship brand forever. We would also, the letter noted, be holding a press conference to share the full story with the world. For 2 days, there was silence. I imagined the panic in their boardrooms, the frantic calls between executives and lawyers. I imagined Julian and Isabella trying to explain how they had managed to fly the company's golden goose directly into a jet engine. They were trapped. If they fought us, the truth of their incompetence would become a public spectacle, destroying what little credibility they had left. If they settled, they would be admitting their guilt and handing over a fortune. On the afternoon of the third day, my phone rang. It was Marcus. He didn't even say hello. Patricia Winters just called, he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. Her first words were, "Tell us what you want." The negotiation was not held at the House of Orlaia. It was not held at Marcus's office. Patricia Winters, the general counsel, insisted on neutral territory. We met in a sterile conference room at a high-end corporate law firm in Midtown, a place so devoid of personality it felt like it had been designed by accountants. The air was thick with the scent of expensive fear. Their delegation was a study in contrasts. Patricia was in her late 60s, a silver-haired shark in a perfectly tailored suit. Her face was a mask of professional calm, but the tension in her jaw was a tell. Next to her, 2 junior lawyers sat ramrod straight, avoiding eye contact, looking like they would rather be anywhere else on earth. And then there was Julian. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a pallor and a hunted look in his eyes. He had lost millions of dollars, torched his family's legacy, and was now about to face the woman he had so casually discarded. Isabella Rossi was conspicuously absent. A casualty, I presumed, of the initial corporate bloodletting. Marcus and I sat across the vast mahogany table from them. He placed a single, slim leather folder in front of him. It was mostly for show. The real power wasn't in the documents, it was in the facts they couldn't escape. Patricia began, her voice smooth and practiced. "Thank you for meeting with us. We've reviewed the claims made in your letter. While the company contests many of your assertions, we are here today in good faith to find a swift and discreet resolution." Marcus smiled, a polite, chilling gesture. "Patricia, let's dispense with the formalities. We're not here to debate assertions. We're here to discuss the invoice for your client's 5-year-long theft of Ms. Craig's intellectual property. A theft which, as a direct consequence, has led to what I believe is the most disastrous product launch in the history of the cosmetics industry. Discretion is a luxury you can no longer afford. Good faith, on the other hand, is going to cost you." Julian flinched as if he'd been slapped. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Thorne, inflammatory language will not help your client." "My client doesn't need help," Marcus shot back. She has the patent, the research logs, and several 100,000 bottles of rancid perfume as evidence. What do you have? The room fell silent. Patricia took a slow, deliberate breath. What is your client's position? Marcus opened his folder. Our position is quite simple. The wrongful termination is a small matter. We'll settle for a standard 7-figure sum for that. The real issue is the intellectual property. We have calculated the damages for 5 years of unpaid licensing fees for the Oralux molecule, based on industry-standard royalty rates for a product of this revenue scale. That figure is $30 million. One of the junior lawyers made a small, choking sound. Julian's face went from pale to ghostly white. That number is preposterous, Patricia said, though her voice lacked conviction. Is it? I spoke for the first time, my voice calm and even. I looked directly at Julian. You sold over $500 million worth of Elysian bloom in the last 5 years. A standard 6% royalty is a conservative valuation for a cornerstone patent. My math says that's $30 million. The math is the math, Julian. You're the one with the MBA, you should appreciate that. He refused to meet my gaze. Patricia rallied. The company was under the impression that all work performed by Ms. Craig was work for hire, as stipulated in her employment contract. And it was, Marcus countered, for any work developed using company resources on company time. However, the patent for the Oralux molecule was filed 36 months before Ms. Craig's start date. Her personal research logs, which we have had forensically verified, go back even further. You didn't hire an employee who invented something on your dime. You hired an inventor and then used her pre-existing, patented work without her consent. It's a textbook case of infringement. Patricia knew she was beaten on the facts, so she pivoted to negotiation. Look, we are prepared to make a substantial offer to make this go away. $5 million. For a full transfer of all related patents and a permanent non-disclosure agreement. Marcus actually laughed. A short, sharp, incredulous bark. $5 million? Patricia, you just spent more than that recalling your defective product. This isn't a negotiation over a fender bender. This is a salvage operation for your entire brand. That offer is an insult. Then what do you want? She asked, the professional mask finally cracking. Marcus slid a single sheet of paper across the table. You have 2 options. I watched Julian's eyes scan the page, his knuckles white as he gripped the table's edge. Option 1, Marcus said, narrating for effect, is the clean break. You pay a one-time settlement of $50 million. This includes past damages and a complete buyout of the Oralux patent and all related trade secrets, including the formula for the stabilizer. Ms. Craig walks away, you get the keys to the kingdom, and we all sign the strictest NDA your lawyers can draft. He paused, letting the number hang in the air. Option 2 is the licensing agreement. You pay the $30 million for past damages immediately. Going forward, you will enter into a licensing agreement with Ms. Craig for the use of her intellectual property. The fee will be $5 million per year, for a minimum of 10 years, with royalties adjusted for inflation. She retains full ownership of her patents, and there will be no NDA. Ms. Craig will retain the right to tell her story. Publicly, Julian finally snapped. This is extortion, it's blackmail. No, Julian, I said, my voice still quiet. Extortion is what you do in dark alleys. This is what you do in a boardroom. It's called intellectual property law. You tried to democratize luxury. I'm simply democratizing the truth. You want my work, you pay my price. You want my silence, that costs extra. Patricia put a restraining hand on Julian's arm. She knew they were out of moves. The choice wasn't between paying and not paying. It was between paying a fortune for the formula and their secrets, or paying a slightly smaller fortune for the formula while allowing the story of their incompetence to become an industry legend. One option was a massive financial hit. The other was a massive financial hit combined with a permanent brand humiliation. We need to discuss this with our board, she said stiffly. You have 24 hours, Marcus said, closing his folder. After that, the offer is withdrawn, we file the suit, and my first call will be to the New York Times. I'm sure they'll be very interested in the story of the MBA CEO who didn't understand the science his own company was built on. We stood up and walked out, leaving them in the silent, expensive room to contemplate the ruins. They didn't take the 24 hours. They took 3. The call came from Patricia to Marcus. They chose option 2. They would pay the $30 million for past damages and the $5 million a year licensing fee. They were so desperate for the stabilizer formula to stop the bleeding that they were willing to sacrifice their reputation to get it. They chose to survive publicly, even if it meant being permanently scarred. The signing of the settlement was a quiet, surreal affair. The wire transfer for $30 million hit my account before the ink was dry. It was a number so large it felt abstract, unreal. Julian was not present. He had, according to a terse company memo, resigned to pursue other opportunities. Isabella Rossi had already been scrubbed from the company website. The old guard was gone. A few weeks later, with my stabilizer formula now in their possession, the House of Orlia relaunched Elysian Bloom. This time, there was no flashy marketing, just a quiet, humble return to the shelves. They issued a public apology, blaming significant production errors and promising a return to the uncompromising quality our customers deserve. But the real story came out, not because I held a press conference, but because I didn't have to. The details leaked from inside the wounded company. The story of the fired perfumer, the stolen secret, the ticking chemical time bomb, it became the cautionary tale of the year. It was discussed in hushed tones at industry conventions and written up as a case study in business journals. With part of the settlement, I did something my mother would have been proud of. I bought a beautiful, sunlit loft in Brooklyn and built my dream laboratory from scratch. I founded my own brand, a small, fiercely independent house called Craig Botanicals. My mission was simple: radical transparency, uncompromising artistry, and ethically sourced ingredients. I wasn't just making perfume, I was starting a movement. The most surprising call came 6 months after the settlement. It was from a woman named Eleanor Vance. She introduced herself as the new CEO of the House of Orlia, hired to clean up Julian's mess. She was a legend in the industry, a woman known for her integrity and her deep respect for the craft. "Ms. Craig," she said, her voice warm but direct, "I won't waste your time with empty apologies. What was done to you was inexcusable. I am calling today not to ask for forgiveness, but to ask for your help. We have the formula, but we have lost our soul. We are adrift." I was prepared to dislike her, to reject whatever offer she was about to make, but her honesty was disarming. "What kind of help are you looking for, Ms. Vance?" "I want to propose a collaboration," she said. "A new fragrance, a joint creation between the House of Orlia and Aviana Craig. We would be completely transparent about the partnership. It would be a story of reconciliation, of a legacy brand learning from its mistakes and honoring the artist who built it." I was silent for a long time, stunned by the audacity, the humility of the offer. This was more than just a business deal. It was a chance to rewrite the ending of my own story, to turn an act of revenge into an act of creation. "I'll do it," I said, a decision forming in my heart with sudden clarity. "On one condition." "Name it," she said. 10% of the profits from this collaboration," I said, "will be used to establish the Aura Legacy Foundation, a nonprofit that will provide legal funds and patent support for independent perfumers and creators so that what happened to me never happens to anyone else again." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Eleanor Vance began to laugh, a genuine, delighted sound. "Ms. Craig," she said, "you are a remarkable businesswoman and a remarkable artist. It will be an honor to work with you." And just like that, the final note of my story settled into place. It wasn't the sharp, bitter note of revenge I had expected. It was something far more complex, more lasting. It was the warm, resonant bass note of redemption. I had not only reclaimed my work and my worth, I had used my victory to build a shield for others. I walked over to the window of my new lab, looking out at the city skyline. I was no longer a ghost in the machine. I was the architect of my own legacy, a legacy built not on secrets and betrayal, but on truth, art, and the enduring power of a soul that refused to be bottled.